Mousesports, despite not having the budget to buy out superstars, consistently find them in their custody, and each time it seems that everything they have that's of value has been cherry-picked from them, they consistently manage to remain relevant. So, let's take a quick look back at the history of Mousesports in CSGO and their inexplicable ability to bounce back. But first, I need to give big thanks to Leadify for sponsoring this video. Leadify is an amazing tool that allows you to track and celebrate your unique Counter-Strike accomplishments. It tracks your personal bests and gives you after-match reports to see how well you did. They even have these little achievement badges that portray your accomplishments from any specific match. You can use the compare feature to compare your performance with your friends. Their special Leadify rating uses advanced statistics to reward smart plays and ignore useless frags, giving a more accurate representation of how you did in a game in one single stat line. And hey, even if you're not a numbers person and you prefer the substance of the game, Leadify automatically finds your best play from each match and sends you a highlight generated by All-Star. Thanks again, Leadify, for sponsoring this video. Follow my link in the description or the pinned comment to sign up for free today. Since the genesis of their international roster in 2014, Mousesports have been a very forward-thinking team. They were one of the first international European teams in CSGO. When this Mousesports roster added Alu and Chris J and officially transitioned from speaking German to English, there really was no other relevant team that had taken this approach until around a year later when Kingwin formed and Hellraisers signed Oscar and Sticko. From the end of 2014 to the first half of 2015, Mousesports lost 3 of their best players in quick succession. In retrospect, Mouse made a mistake replacing Tabson, who we now know as the face of Big Clan and the best German CSGO player ever. Alu, who we now know as the electric Finnish opera with maybe a slight ego problem, joined 3D Max, then shortly after stepped up to the plate at NIP to fill their revolving door 5th slot. And finally, Kerrigan, who we all should know went on to become the greatest IGL in CSGO history, decided not to continue with Mouse after standing in with them for a while, and signed with Dignitas, the roster that would go on to become TSM, which would then go on to become Astralis. In retrospect, losing these 3 should have neutered this organization, and it did for a while. Mouse shuffled their roster quite a few times in early 2015, and after failing to qualify for Katowice, they had to make big changes. One of these changes was quite an interesting decision for the time, signing a 6th player as a backup. Who was that 6th player? Well, it was a young upstart talent from Bosnia, Nico. Soon after joining, Nico quickly superseded Spitty on the main roster. Throughout 2016, Mouse would continue to struggle, changing out many German players for international talent, one of which being Oscar, a late-blooming opera who would remain on the team for years to come. Despite the constant shuffling of the roster around Nico though, one thing was for certain about Mousesports at this time. No matter who was in the seats next to him, Nico would drag them kicking and screaming to the finish line. During his time on Mousesports, Nico averaged a 1.17 rating, a 1.43 impact rating, and a staggering 90.2 ADR. To put this in context, let's compare Nico's Mouse stats to the best rifler of our time, Axial's stats on Cloud9. Axial's statistics on Cloud9 have been similar, albeit in my opinion slightly worse, to Nico's on Mouse. While Axial's rating is technically higher, it's important to note that Nico's Mousesports rating is in rating 1.0, which is less accurate than the more modern rating 2.0, introduced by HLTV in June of 2017. The statistics that we still can compare, ADR and impact rating, tell the story here. Nico did die more than Axial on Cloud9, but there are 2 other factors that we can attribute that to. The popularization of saving in the last 3 years, and the fact that, well, Axial's team wins a lot more than Nico's Mousesports. And that's part of what makes Nico's Mousesports performance so impressive. Axial has what might be the best support system in the world built around him and Shiro. Nico was playing with Spitty, Dennis, and Chris J. Mousesports peaked with this roster at World Rank 8. It is not possible for me to oversell how well Nico played despite being in a team that really didn't do much. I mentioned earlier that partway through Nico's tenure in Mouse, they added a guy named Oscar. Before he joined Mouse, Oscar was playing on one of the other international European teams that I mentioned earlier, Hellraisers, alongside a young supportive element named Sticko. On Hellraisers, Oscar was the clear standout talent, being head and shoulders above his teammates in terms of statistics. His switch to Mousesports did not garner immediate success though. Despite offering Nico some much needed support, having a good op player was not enough to drag this team fully out of the trenches, and as such, Nico decided that it was time for him to win. In one of the biggest Counter-Strike signings ever, Nico left Mousesports and signed to FaZe Clan. Losing a superstar is one of the worst things that can happen to a team in CSGO. A player like Nico is irreplaceable. Generational talents don't come around every day. Or maybe they do.
Something for mousesports to work with. He's retrieved an M4. I don't think it's got any ammo left in it, so he's got to get this done with the Deagle, and he does find the first man in. He's just checked, and yeah, see another for Rops, and the Deagle might be all it takes! Rops!
Short rotate on Lock. Crimson is already there though, and Bemis will force him off his perk. Now Rops arrives, and such a clinical, precise execution. Give us a 4.
Capitalizes, but they have to deal with Rops, and he is ridiculous with his AK, looking for the 1 versus 1s. He finds the 1. Can he get any kills here? There it is, though. He has to get the reload in. Somebody is now elevated. Rops, he makes it work. Rops with 3.
To fill the enormous shoes left by NiKo, mousesports signed a rising star off of FPL named Rops. The year prior, NiKo actually selected Rops as his talent to look out for heading into 2017 in his top 20 player interview. But yeah, Rops. You know him, I'm not going to pretend like you don't. Rops was so notoriously good in FPL that a lot of players accused him of cheating. To beat these allegations, Rops was actually flown out to the FACEIT headquarters in London so he could play FPL from there and prove himself to be a legitimate player. But the shuffling in MOUZ was not quite done. They ended up making 2 signings during the first player break of 2017, one of which was a young Finnish player known as Suni, who had a great showing at the Major with Penta, and the other, well, we already know him, that young support player Sticko, who played with Oscar and Hellraisers. This starting 5 would bring something to mousesports that they hadn't had ever. A stable roster. And this stable roster would produce amazing results when you consider the players they were working with. This mousesports roster was a group of misfits. Rops, the accused cheater who proved everyone wrong. Oscar, the star AWP player who started his CS career at 24. chrisJ, the Dutch franchise player who had been on and off the bench for the past 4 years. Sticko, a young player with great mechanics who decided to forego his own personal performances in favor of helping his team. And Suni, the Finnish journeyman who had finally started coming into his own. For some reason, when I think of mousesports, I think of this roster. It was not their longest standing roster, it was not their best roster, but it feels like it embodied everything that the org was. They had style, flair, and were perpetually the underdogs. And these underdogs were quite good too. They peaked at second in the world and won 3 events over the span of just over 6 months. Apart from a brief period where Snax replaced Sticko on the active roster, during which nothing really happened.
From Connector. Wants to try and hold off the rotations. Oscar's gone. Chris is an op still in the picture. Op still very much in the round. Oh, Chris! He's found 3. It's down to a 2-on-2. Chris, can he close this with an ace? Oh my God! Chris, the Wolf of Wall Street gets an ace, and it's championship point mousesports.
Okay, yeah, that happened. But what I was saying was that this squad of 5 players kept together for a little over a year. After the best results in the history of the team at first, the roster began to stagnate, and despite them being ranked 5th in the world at the time and peaking at number 2, mousesports decided to completely overhaul their roster. Only Rops and chrisJ remained, with Sticko, Oscar, and Sunny departing MOUZ for good. In lieu of these 3 joined Woxic, a young Turkish opper known for his high sensitivity, Frozen, a 16-year-old relatively unknown talent, and, of course, the return of Karrigan. In his time away from MOUZ, Karrigan had built quite a name for himself. Having won a whopping 12 trophies, Karrigan was solidified at this point as a first-in-class in-game leader. But for some reason, people were hesitant to believe that he could do it again. I won't act like most of you guys don't know what happened next. This was only a few years ago now, but yeah. Karrigan's mousesports, while it took a few months to heat up, was a steamroller. They won 4 events in quick succession, triumphing over teams that were known at the time as the best of the best. Prime Astralis coming hot off of their last major victory, Team Liquid after the Grand Slam, Evil Geniuses after their hot streak after the major, all fell to the hands of the mighty Karrigan and his squad of killers. Peaking at a sustained number 2 in the world for a few months, this was the best squad that mousesports had ever fielded. When you look at these 5 players, note that every single one of them is an alumni of the mousesports talent scouting team, Rops being added to the squad at the young age of 18. Karrigan's first bout with the organization came in 2010 when he was just 20, chrisJ being the oldest to join but the longest standing member, with the organization having retained him since he was 23, Woxic, probably the least MOUZ alumni of the group, having been taken from Hellraisers at 21, and finally, Frozen, the 16-year-old talent picked up out of Crystal's No Chance. MOUZ helped to build the careers of these players. Their track record when it comes to young upcoming talent is unbelievable. All of the success took place in late 2019 and early 2020. And what I would like to say here is that Karrigan's Mousesports went on to continue to dominate. But after IEM Katowice 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic caused Counter-Strike to enter its online era. While initially they did well, MOUZ would lose their steam playing online, and this roster's performance would plummet. Woxic was the first to fall, but after a year of playing online, Karrigan was easily tempted back to FaZe, and this Mousesports roster was forced to rebuild once again. This rebuild was not as successful as the previous two. In the end, the only two to remain from the previous roster were ropz and Frozen. The three players that Mousesports got to fill out their roster were Dexter, an Australian in-game leader who had been performing well on Renegades, Acor, a Danish opper who had looked fantastic on Mad Lions, and BMOS, a very young player who had just been kicked from FaZe Clan. Despite Frozen and ropz consistently performing to an amazing level, Mousesports in this era was not a good team. Dexter and Acor both didn't perform up to the standard that they were expected to, and BMOS didn't offer much relief either, although he wasn't all that bad. In early 2022, the nail in the coffin of this era of MOUZ was sealed, when once again, their star rifler was picked up by FaZe Clan. To replace ropz, MOUZ shuffled their roster once more. They removed Acor and promoted an opera from their academy team named Torji. To replace ropz, they brought in the experienced NBK. I'm sure he'll bring a level of maturity to the roster, and they'll stick together for a long time. 2 months into NBK's tenure on MOUZ, NBK was replaced by JDC, another player from the Academy League. Speaking of, the Mousesports Academy roster, MOUZ NXT, was really good. They won 4 straight seasons of the WePlay Academy League, and hilariously were at one point ranked higher than the main Mousesports roster. During this era, many joked that MOUZ should just cut their main roster and replace it with their academy team. And over the past year or so, through a convoluted network of trades, that is exactly what they have done. They replaced their main team's coach with that of MOUZ NXT, removed BMOS and added a star rifler named Exertion from their academy roster, and just in this offseason sidelined Dexter to add an alumni from their academy league named Shui, who had just made a major final. Oh, and they also cut JDC, one of their original Academy League players who had been promoted, in favor of another Academy League player, this time a revered 16-year-old talent named Yimpat. When I say that I have almost never been more confident that a roster will work, I mean it. Why? Because this roster already has worked. This core trio played together for ages in the Academy League. Their coach, Cycrone, has played with Shui before in the Academy roster, and the other two? Oh, well, it's just one of the best young rifles on the planet right now, and a guy who the world has been watching since he was 14, knowing that he was going to be the next big thing. Some have brought up that Torji has not been performing extremely well, despite doing great in the Academy League, and to be honest, I'm not too worried. There is, of course, a chance that he crashes and burns, but he's said in the past that he had accepted a passive role within MOUZ, and I have no doubt that Shui will free him up and allow him to take more space. This might go down as a poorly aged take, but I think that this current MOUZ roster makes perfect sense, and I would be shocked if they don't end up doing significant damage on the world stage. More than anything else, this story has proven the importance of a healthy Academy League in the development of talent in Counter-Strike. With the WePlay League shutting its doors temporarily due to the war in Ukraine, I would urge any team that actively participates in World Counter-Strike, even if they themselves do not field an Academy roster, to work with WePlay to keep them afloat during this time when they are unable to produce their product. Losing this league would be devastating to the scene. Mousesports are an enigma within Counter-Strike, a team that has been known to not have the money to make all-star signings, but is intelligent enough to consistently find these diamonds in the rough. In a world where TSM is rumored to be signing Jax, Inters, and Cypher as the first 3 in their new world-beating project, and so many European teams with larger orgs than MOUZ backing them are willing to recycle the same mid players over and over, it's nice to see the team that has been consistently rewarded for taking risks on young guns succeed. Thank you. Alright, it's time for the bonus penguin. This one, yeah, it's a little weird. It's different from the usual content. I'm trying something new. If you guys like this more esports focused content, I can of course make more. I'm someone who, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but I've always been very, very in tune with the esports scene. Fun penguin fact, I actually wrote esports articles before I did YouTube. But yeah, I could do this a lot if you guys like it. It was a lot of fun for me, especially because I'm a big fan of a lot of the players that Mousesports have picked up. I'm not actually that big of a Mousesports fan. It's funny I had to throw in some clips of the EG16-0 because Evil Geniuses, and specifically that Evil Geniuses, is my favorite team of all time. But, alright, Modern Penguin, just giving a quick word right here. I just want to say, on the record, I made this video before IEM Cologne, even the play-in had started. That's why I had to use Academy team footage in that one section. And I just want to say, this video has already aged great. Props to me. That's all. Yeah, if you guys like this one, I can make more esports focused content, of course. If you liked it a lot, give it a like, subscribe. But yeah, see ya.